Hi, Keeja. How are
Hello,
you? I am so
I'm
excited to have
doing
you
great.
here. Welcome, welcome. Where are you right now? And you live in Montana, is that what I read?
Yes, right now I'm in a tiny town, Miles City, Montana, which is about 2 hours away from Billings and any other kind of civilization. But it's a small town, about between 5 to 8,000 people, I believe, and it's still considered one of the largest towns in the area. So
Wow,
it's still you can find it. You just got to look really hard on the map.
that's cool. That's good. I like small towns. I'm from a small town. I live right outside of Phoenix now, which is one of the largest cities in the US, and I love it. But where I live feels very small. So I like small towns. What I don't like is winter. So I hope you enjoy that because
Mm.
Montana's snowy and cold. What's the weather up
It
there
it was
now?
It's about 80 degrees outside right now. The winter this year wasn't too bad. The year before was a little worse, but I think I got here after all the bad winters happened.
Yeah. What brought you to Montana, if you don't mind me asking? You said in your bio, correct me if I'm wrong, are you from Jamaica?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Um, Go
I
ahead.
can give you a little backstory. So I'm from Jamaica and I moved to Boston when I was about 13. And after I finished high school, I went to the military, got married, got divorced, and then ended up in Montana
And
because
ended
my
up,
sister was here. So
oh,
it's just a little zigzag across the coast before I came all the way across the country.
that's cool though. So are you still close with your sister? She's still right down the street, one of
Yes.
those 5,000 people in town.
Yes, we live about a mile away from each other. I've only been in Miles City 2 years. So for that first year, we actually shared a house. We had this really large house, me and my two kids, and her two kids, and my dog and her cat. It was just, a little crazy. So eventually we got separate abodes. Now she lives a mile from me, and we still see each other every day because we work at
Nice.
the same place.
Nice. I love that. I love that. Boston. How did you like Boston?
I liked it. It was a lot different from Jamaica because we came from Jamaica in the middle of December, the day after a snowstorm, no winter jackets, no snow boots. It was it was an eye opener. It was a culture shock and a culture freeze at the same time because it was so cold and so new to all of us. There's five kids and four of us were born in Jamaica. So we made that trip here in December, and it was just a lot different from what you saw on TV growing up in Jamaica. And the expectation and reality was just so much apart from each other. It was scary at times.
Yeah. Wow. I've been to Boston a few times and love it. Love it up there. Actually wrote a short story for this annual and it takes place in Boston. Boston has a special place in my heart, but I would always choose Jamaica over Boston, hands down, especially
Yes.
in December,
Mm-hmm.
hands
Most
down.
definitely.
So you are featured and by the way, this is the first. I'm going to show it to you. I got proof copies here. You can't really see it because of my background. There you go. Beautiful, isn't it? I mean, it's
Yes,
like
it
I got to
is.
stop moving it around. Um, you are, and this is the real proof copy because I did a video a while ago with a bad cover on it. It was just a mock-up cover, but you're featured in this annual, and I know I told you to be quiet, but I've already said it on social media. Your poems, there goes my dog again, um, are my absolute favorites in this in this anthology. Um, without giving away, obviously, without reading your pieces and without giving away everything, because we want people to read these and feel what I felt when I read them. Let's talk about that. Your first one is called "Pretty for a Colored Girl." Just tell me about it. I've like it could spew a bunch of questions, but just tell me what this is, what this piece means to you.
So it both pieces I can start saying right now is they're written from personal experience. Um, as most, if not everyone, knows, there's a struggle going on with race and, you know, the whole Black Lives Matter movement and the All Lives Matter. And that wasn't the reason why I wrote it. Why I wrote it is because of what I experienced. It may not be an overtly aggressive thing that had happened, but it just stuck. It was stuck in the back of my mind on this repeating loop all the time. I'm like, why would someone say that? Why can't I just be pretty? Why does it have to be because I'm something else? And I kept discussing it with my sister, with my friends, with other family members. And 2 years later, it was just still on this repeating loop. And I've discovered throughout most of my writing, sometimes the easiest way for me to get rid of that thing that's constantly building up inside is to put it on paper, because I'm more eloquent on paper than I am in person. And I wrote it and I looked at it, and I probably could have changed a couple of things, but every time I looked at it, I'm like, nope, this is how I wanted this. These are the words I wanted to say. This is how I was feeling. This is the anger that came. This is why. And I just put it all out there. And there are a lot of professors I'd had in my creative writing courses that say, try to avoid putting yourself in your pieces. All my best pieces come when I just throw my whole self in it. And I'm always open to the idea that with criticism that will come to for either piece, I can't take it personally, because I did put myself out there. Even though it was written for me, I know I'm not the only one experiencing these things or having these ideas on a repeating loop. So I wanted to put it out there so other people could read and relate and, you know, get another view of what somebody else may be experiencing that they haven't experienced yet.
That's powerful. So let me address a couple of things. First of all, I've never had a professor tell me not to write from personal experiences. As writers, we always hear, when you're new at your craft, write what you know. And this is what you know. This is your life. This is, you know, these are the roads that you walk. But you also want to write things that resonate. And this is a message of how somebody spoke to you and how you felt because of their words. You had to justify why you're a beautiful woman, or that you're a beautiful woman, you know, in spite of their opinions, or in spite of everything that makes you who you are. It's powerful to come from that place of personal experience, because that's what resonates. I am clearly not a Black woman, but I can tell you, as a gay woman, I've had plenty of men tell me things like, you know, well, you just haven't had the right one. Um, it's not going to make me straight. You know, you being beautiful as a Black woman is exactly who you are, and should never be justified or excused. And this piece is so powerful. This is, can I read the last line? Can I do that? Do you mind if I do that? I have it up on my other screen over here so I get it right. You say that in the very last line of this poem, I am not pretty despite my Blackness. I am pretty because I am a colored girl. I want you to take that quote and I want you to put it on a poster with some beautiful artwork. And I want you, I want to see that poster in every young girl's bedroom across this land. That's what I want for this piece. This is powerful. This is exactly what, not just because of today, we needed this message 40 years ago, 60 years ago, 20 years ago. Everybody needs this message, that we are all beautiful in spite of what others think or what others see on the outside. Young girls need this. Before I even saw your face, your profile, your social media, anything, all I had was a submission with your name and the pieces that you submitted. I imagined a young girl. I didn't imagine a woman. I didn't imagine a mother. I didn't imagine somebody with your credentials, with your past, with your military experience, with your uh, college education, with a master's degree. I imagined a young girl, a young woman, a teenager, somebody in their 20s maybe. That was the picture in my head. Was this is a message that needs to be heard and felt, not just for young Black girls, but for everyone. Everyone needs to feel these words. Everyone needs to feel that what we say makes a huge difference in how people perceive themselves. And clearly, this is your personal experience. Something somebody said to you resonated for this long and stayed with you as a part of your pain. It's powerful. It's really, really powerful. So that's my challenge to you. Put that quote on a poster. And
I think I just
get
might do that.
get it out there. Get some amazing artwork. I have a graphic artist who's amazing and not expensive if you don't know any artists or you're not one yourself, or get your kids to draw something amazing. Um, and put it out there on, I can't even name the sites now, all the Threadless, all the sites that you can just upload your graphics to t-shirts and posters, and let people see this, because this is a powerful message, and this is what we need to know right now in our world. Not just young Black women, not just Black girls, all of us. This is what we all need to hear right now. This is a very powerful poem, and I can't wait to share it with the world next month when this is released. Thank you for sharing that story and those vulnerabilities. I think, and I started to say earlier, something like these messages can resonate with us even if we're not the person walking in those particular shoes. It resonated with me, and I don't know what it's like to be pretty for a colored girl. Those aren't my shoes. That's not my path. But I do know what it's like to have somebody pull me down because they've picked on something that defines who I am and addresses my core and makes me feel less than worthy. And I think most of us can live in that space and understand the pain, and we all need that message. So thank you for bringing this to light. And it's just such a powerful message. It's, when I first read it, I had to kind of step back and was just like, wow, I got to read that again. I gotta read that, and I gotta feel that. I gotta put myself in those shoes and imagine what it was like for this young girl who I imagined wrote the poem, to have somebody say, you're pretty for a colored girl in this day and age, not in the 1940s, not in the 1950s, not in the but today.
Yeah, what I keep imagining is, after this gets out there, if that person who said those words, if they see it, like, will they sit and read it and try to imagine it from my point of view, or will they go on and say it to someone else because they think it's okay? I probably will never see that person again, but it's something that I think about from time to time. Like, would they change after they realize the effect of what they said, or will they just keep on keeping on?
It's a really good question. I like to live in a world of hope where you think that your work and your words resonate so much that people stand back and go, oh, that was me. Yeah, I regret that, and I'm sorry, and I won't do it again. But I'm also pretty cynical, and I think the people who say things like that from the start are probably not first world changers. They're not going to go out there and change the world. They're more likely to excuse their behaviors because, dot, 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 because whatever is built into them. I'm a big advocate of changing our beliefs over time. We don't necessarily have to be everything that we were taught when we were growing up. We don't necessarily, whether it's political or religious or, social, we don't have to live in those beliefs that we were taught from childhood. We just don't have to. As adults, we are capable and have permission to walk away from what we were taught. I have a family member who she actually passed away this year, so I'm not going to say horrible things about her, but about 25 years ago, I walked away from her because of her racist comments and her comments about me and a girlfriend that I had brought home. And about 6 years ago, I went back home, and she was a much older woman and had in-home healthcare, and all of her in-home nurses were beautiful Black women, and she was horrible to them. And I told my mother, this is why I walked away, so long ago. I don't know why I came back. I do not want this woman talking to my children. I don't, I just don't. My family for years has it's just who she is. They've justified. It's just who she is. It's just how she was raised. I'm sorry. We don't have to live in those beliefs. So if this person who said that to you because this person had heard it their whole lives, somebody on TV, oh yeah, she's pretty for whatever. We've heard it. I've heard it for Barbara Streisand with her Jewish nose. I don't know how old you are, but that's the generation of my parents. I've heard that she's pretty for a Jewish woman. She's pretty for that. She's pretty, even though she's got that whatever, that mole. That we need to stop that as a society. We need to stop justifying beauty in spite of something and recognize that we are beautiful people because of something. And that's exactly what you said in your last line. I am pretty because I am a colored girl. You are pretty because you are just a beautiful soul and a beautiful woman. But you're absolutely right. You are pretty because you are a colored girl. And that's part of your core and what makes you who you are. And to have anybody take that away from you is devastating, absolutely devastating. But in that devastation, you created a beautiful piece. So I'm honored to have that in this year's annual. You're a mom. You are welcome to talk about your kids. You don't have to if you don't want to. I want you to be comfortable. So if you want to talk about ages or genders or whatever you want, that's yours. But what do you teach your kids as a beautiful colored girl, as a beautiful Black woman, as a Black mother? What do you teach your kids? And from your perspective, so my kid's not the one saying something like this to your kids one day or to anybody. What do I teach my kids?
Well, my kids are mixed, so their dad is white, so they are light enough to pass. I don't know if you've ever read the story Passing. And every time I look at my kids, it's what I think about, how back in the day, when colored women were of mixed culture or mixed race, and they're really light skinned with the straight hair, they could pass as white women. So my kids, to most people, just look like really tan white kids. But I've never had either one of them look at me and say, "Mom, why is your skin brown and my skin white?" They've never asked that question. And it's real funny, just recently, in my 7-year-old, he was talking about something at school, and he was explaining to someone, he's like, well, it's like, what are you? He's like, well, I'm Black and my sister is Black. And my 3-year-old goes like, I'm not Black, I'm white. But she doesn't understand it in the sense of skin color and race. She's thinking more like, well, my skin is not Black, it's lighter than that, it's a different color, so I'm not Black. So she doesn't quite grasp the idea of that she's mixed. or that she's considered a Black girl despite how light her skin is. And I try to instill in them the idea that, you know, being different is okay. You don't have to be just like everyone else. And if someone else is different, it does not make them wrong. If their ideas are different, if their beliefs are different, it does not make them a bad person. It just means that you and them are different people. You can still be in the same space, you can still enjoy the same activities, you can still do all the same things as long as you be uniquely you. So you don't have to conform to what they want you to be who you are, and the people who like you as you are, they will be the ones who will be your real friends. And that's what I'm trying to raise them on, because if they have that in their heads now, when they get older and they can make more informed decisions, they can pick out who they want to be their friends, then they have all these ideas, you know, not because this person has green eyes and red hair and this person has black curly hair doesn't mean we can't be friends. We are who we are, and we accept each other for who we are.
Just be a good human. I
Exactly.
love that. I love that. That's exactly what I teach my kids. With that said, I think it's also important, and I did, especially after the events of last year and the new uprising in social justice. I did sit down with my 12-year-old son and had to have some important talks with him. And he's got two moms, and he has a dad as well, and he has two sisters, and so he's the only white male in my house. He has a dad, but his dad's not in my house, obviously. Um, I had to sit down with him and say, you know, you're surrounded by a bunch of women, and you need to understand that one day you will be a white man, and you need to understand what life is like for people who are not white men, and that includes women, and that includes black men, and that includes, you know, everything in between. I mean, I could make up a list. I'm not trying to belittle that list, but we don't have time to go through everything in between. But as a white man, he is at the top of I don't want to say totem pole. That's what I was going to say. Um, he is perceived. He will be perceived as somebody who, you know, life should be fairly easy for. He will not face things that you or I will face as women. He will not face things your son will face if you have a son. He will not face things his friends will face, who are not, you know, the same skin color as him. Same, he's the redheaded, freckled, green eye. Actually, he has blue eyes, but they are sometimes green. He's that kid. His life will be inherently different just because of the color of his skin, because of his gender. It just will be. It will be really, and he's been raised by two women. So um, we have a lot of influence on him. But I am a big proponent of everything you just said. Be a good human. Just be a good human. I do think it's important, and this is one of those lessons that I think I've really tried to instill and have really learned myself over the last 18 months or so, is that our culture does matter. If I really want to get to know you and who you are, your culture does matter. It's not just that you're a good human and my friend, and we're going to hang out, we're going to have fun, and we're going to have things in common. But to know who you are, I need to be able to embrace who you are, and that's your culture, and that's your Blackness, and that's your history and your heritage. And it doesn't matter if it's, you know, if you're Black or what we're dealing with right now in this culture with Asian hate crimes. You know, getting to know that culture is really important, and that's a new shift in our social justice in this country, especially. Um, it's a really eye-opening moment in our world in this time. Um, but yeah, I love what you just said. Just be a good human, be good to people, and make those connections, and those connections will drive your friendships. I've always taught my kids, yeah, it doesn't, like, no one's gonna judge who you are based on whether or not they like your shoes. They don't like your shoes, then they just don't like your shoes. It doesn't mean that you're a terrible person. But yeah, good job, Mama. Your second poem that you submitted, and I told you earlier before we started recording that I probably won't be able to talk about this a whole lot. This one really resonated with me because it hit me in a time where I have felt the most vulnerable in my life. And isn't that what we want to do with our writing? Is resonate, hit people where they feel it. The river hit me right where right where it needed to. Talk to me about that. What is the river for you?
The river is basically right now is the flow of my life up until this point. I'd hit so many low points where most normal people would have given up and just done something else. And I'm really stubborn. I discovered that, especially over the last couple of years. Um, I was bullied through middle school, and at no point did I say, well, you know, I don't want to go to the school anymore because they bully me there. I found ways to work around it and to avoid the things that put me in the spot where I would end up getting bullied. And when all that failed, I found somebody who would help me, because a lot of the times is kids feeling not feeling able to go out, reach out and get that help. And from the time I started in middle school, I always had a someone who would support me as an immigrant, first time in an American schooling system, and that was different and interesting to me. So it was a whole part of the culture shock, and my accent was really strong, and that's where most of the bullying came from. So unfortunately, for part of that time, I just didn't talk to anybody. And then I got to high school and I just thought, well, middle school was so bad, it must be the same thing. So I stepped back and I was quiet for the first 3 weeks. And, most people just thought I just didn't talk or wasn't able to, because I was rarely ever picked on to answer a question in class or anything like that. And finally, I would think it was an English class or something, and a question was asked, and I raised my hand to answer. It's like I volunteered. I put myself in that spot, and I answered. And after class, somebody came up to me like, "Oh my gosh, I just thought you were mute." And I'm like, "I know. What'd you think? Would you look at that? No, I can talk. That's fine." And I realized that even though my friend circle did not grow exponentially in high school, I was never picked on, I was never bullied, because the culture was different in high school. There were other Jamaicans there, there were Haitians. It was very, very diverse for my high school. So nobody had any of those little racial issues. Like, there were just as many Blacks as there were whites, there were Asians, Hispanics. It was just everybody was there, and nobody ever said, well, I don't want you sitting with me because you're Asian. But it was like all of these things building up. And the most recent, 2 years ago, so right before I moved to Miles City, I ended up getting a divorce. And that had probably been one of my lowest points. And I don't even know if this is something you would say. I'd always ask the question, what is the thing in a person's mind that says, I can't move forward from here. This hurts too much. I will end it. And I've always said, I don't, I would say sometimes, some people are selfish. It's not the same for everybody. So I can't say that for everyone. But it's the people who had other ways and, could possibly reach out for it. But I can't judge on that because you never know what's going on in someone's head. But for me, in that moment, I thought to myself, I won't hurt myself because I have other people to think about. But that pain I felt in that moment, it gave me a level of understanding of how somebody could decide, this is the point where I'm done. Because it just seems so unbearable. Like picking up my feet to move forward was such a journey that I honestly, sometimes I don't know how I made it out of it. But I kept thinking, I have my kids to live for, and I have to give them an example for them to follow. I have to leave footsteps for them to follow behind me. And at the time, I was working on my bachelor's at Arizona State, and it was all online. And I kept going. And when I got here in Miles City, I had little under a year left. And in December of 2019, I flew to Arizona and I walked across the stage as the first of my 5 siblings and first of my generation out of my grandmother's grandkids to graduate from college with a bachelor's degree. And then from there, I'm like, all right, I made it this far. How can I keep moving forward? Because my kids are watching and they need to know that if you put your mind to something, you might not achieve exactly what you're going for, but you'll get somewhere. You don't want to stay in the same spot. So every time I've thought I've hit rock bottom, I always found a way back up because you can't go any lower than that. You can only go up. So as long as you don't give up the hope that you have somewhere to get to and someone who has their eyes on you, who depend on you to keep moving forward, you can keep moving forward. And that was the whole logic behind the river, because it's more than just a flow of time for me. It's just time in general. There will always be crossroads. There will be streams that branch off from the main river, and it will take you elsewhere, but it always runs back to the ocean. And you always end up in that same puddles. Like, it depends on how far you want to go as a person. Do you want to stay in that spot or keep moving forward? That was the inspiration for the river.
That is beautiful. That is about as beautiful as the poem itself. Um, your children are watching. That's I told my kids a couple months ago, you're going to watch me go through the toughest year you have ever seen, and you're going to watch me thrive, and you're going to watch me cry a lot, and you're going to watch me struggle, and you're going to watch me get mad and angry, and I'm going to storm out, and I'm going to hug, and I'm going to come to you and lean on you, and I'm going to thrive. We're going to get through this. And that's important. That's it. We all have our lows. We all struggle. We all face adversity. And I've always said that, how we handle adversity defines us as human. And our own path through adversity is different than what somebody else would do. And so, when you say you might not be one to understand why somebody would give up, but you've been low enough to understand how somebody could be there. I've always disliked the selfishness behind suicide. I've always disliked that the idea, I should say, the idea that people say suicide is selfish. It's a pain that I don't think anybody understands unless they've actually been there, or they've been there with somebody they love and watched them go through it. And it's no different than our previous conversation about social justice and eye-opening experiences of diversity in our world, and encompassing humanity as one instead of in individualized groups. Um, it's a conversation. Mental health is a conversation we're finally starting to take seriously after generations and generations of losing people. We're finally, maybe because pandemic, maybe because I don't know. I don't know why, but we are finally starting to take this seriously. I know suicide rates are have drastically increased over the last, 16 months or so since the world closed. And it's horrific. But I know 5 people in my world who I've lost before 2020. So it's not new by any means. Um, and heartache is divorce or losing somebody you love, even if it's through death, through suicide. Heartache is one of those things that you have to love yourself through, and you have to see yourself, you know, through those most difficult moments, or you don't come out on the other side. You drown in your own emotions and you get sucked down into that current. Um, this was a powerful piece too. I mean, I've already said it. Your pieces were my absolute favorites in the poetry. Um, and this is one everyone needs to read as well. I was looking at it real quick to see if I had a line. I was like, put this on a poster, but the whole thing is good. So,
Yeah,
the whole thing out there.
when I wrote this, it was actually during the middle of the pandemic, but I never really had a time where, there were people who were either stuck at home or they were cut off from loved ones. I work full time right now, as as registration staff in a hospital here in Miles City, and you got to see the different sides of people. You got to see the fear because we were probably one of the last towns hit, because we, like, when everybody was shut down, we had maybe 2 cases in Miles City because we were so cut off from everywhere else. And when it finally caught, it kind of just spread like a wildfire, and you got to see the fear and the sadness. And when people were cut off from other family members in the nursing homes, it was sad and it was depressing. But while I'm doing this whole thing, I'm still working full time. My kids still had to go to daycare. I was actually in the middle of doing my online master's degree through Full Sail University, which I graduated in December, and everybody kept asking, like, how do you do it? Like, how do you pull all that off, working full time as a single parent, going to school full time? Because none of the courses were ever, well, I'll take 2 here, 3 there, and just adds up. I was in school straight through. So the entire pandemic, I was always going, there was always something. But it was one of those things where you didn't have the time to stop and wallow in your own self-pity, because they had the whole thing where it's like, I can't, stay home, I'm a healthcare worker. And that was one of the things that were true for me, because there were days I had to volunteer my time. I had days where I was at work like 5, 6, 7 days in a row, and I worked 10-hour days. And it's not an easy thing to do. So not only was I sacrificing time with my kids and cramping down the time I have to work on my education, I was also making sure I was out there helping patients who were coming into the hospital, who were sick and in need of help and needed that extra comfort, or just needed 5 minutes of someone to listen to them because they couldn't go anywhere else to talk to anyone else. And all of that stuff factors into how your mental health develops, because there you can see where some people learned from the isolation. You can see where some people suffered. And for me, I kind of grew, because from helping other people, I was able to find a way to help myself, because just listening to them, you also get the understanding, you're not the only one feeling things, and you don't always know what someone else is experiencing. Sometimes all you can offer is that shoulder for them to lean on, cry on, do whatever. And it I think the pandemic, for some people, it made a lot of people better. It opened their eyes to certain things, and it just made some things easier, some things are harder. You just have to figure out what you learned from it and how you take that to move forward.
Everything you say is powerful. Every time you stop talking, I think, wow, that's really powerful.
Don't ask me to say it again later though, because I will never remember it.
You say again. Yeah, it's been a tough year for everyone. In your small town, 5,000-6,000 people, how hard were you eventually hit?
At one point we were having, because the hospital I work at is the main hospital for, I think it's probably like 3 or 4 counties, because otherwise you would have to drive hours away to the next one. And most people, there are people who would drive anywhere from 4 hours or more to get to our hospital there, because it's one of the closest healthcare facilities they have that can provide the type of healthcare they need. So there were times when we were having patients, we had like 16 positives in a day or something like that. And it just kept growing. And then it would start from one person, it just snowballed and it just got so crazy. Everything was, they closed down bars and restaurants, but obviously, food for grocery stores and stuff like that were open. They had to implement safety measures so that, people could actually get the things they needed. But it was still sort of like a ghost town, because you can't invite anybody over for dinner, because then they start asking you 10,000 questions like, has anybody in your family had a cough? Do you have a fever? I'm like, you shouldn't have to interview someone to go to dinner.
Right.
And it was so different. It just made a small town seem so much smaller because everybody was isolated, and it was just different. My sister and I, we work in the same hospital, so we never really felt that isolation, because we worked with each other. We had each other, our kids go to school together. So whenever we had to go to work, all our kids were together in the same place. So it's kind of hard to stay away from each other. And then we were also at work where we got to see people every day, and we had to have actual conversations with people. So we never got that true sense of isolation that some people felt. And I think that's what made it easier for some of us, but there were other people who had it far worse.
Wow. It's been devastating worldwide, obviously, but it's always interesting to me to hear what it's like outside of, my little bubble. I work from home. 3 kids, 2 of them are online. One of them went back to campus by choice, and he's in elementary school, so I wasn't really worried because they just kind of stay together. They're not changing individual classes like you do in high school. My 2 high schoolers stayed online. But it's interesting. I mean, we obviously had the same things here. Bars and restaurants closed down, but my life didn't change a whole lot because I was still home. And but it's interesting. I have a friend in Italy who was messaging me early on. When Italy was going through all the horrific stuff they were going through early on, where they couldn't get medical care and people were just dying in their homes and they couldn't come and retrieve bodies. And it's horrific all around. It's just really sad, but it's interesting. One of the things about this anthology, and hopefully you'll see it when you read it, is that we brought 46, I get the number ended up at 46 authors together from around the world. We have in this anthology, we've got writers from, oh goodness, I should have a list in front of me, from Hungary, from I think there are 3 countries in Africa that I can think of off the top of my head, from England, from Ireland, from Canada, from the US. We're just like all just around the entire globe. And the themes of all of these stories and all of these poetry are the same. It's this thread of humanity that we all love, we all hurt, we all feel pain, we all want to be accepted and not just tolerated. It's inspiring and it's eye-opening that from all walks of life, we all go through the same things. So I just find it interesting to hear, you know, I'm outside of Phoenix, which is huge, and this is my world, this is my bubble. So the news I get is from Phoenix. And you talk about, you know, we had 14 people die yesterday from COVID. That's a lot less than the hundreds that were dying here in the Phoenix area a year ago. So we're celebrating that. But you know, 14 people in your little world, in your little small town is a lot of people. Should you have that, you know, or just snowball, it could wipe out your entire town. So yeah, it's interesting. Thank you for sharing that. So I'm excited to have you part of this anthology. Tell me what's next for you.
So I actually got accepted into New York University Steinhardt, their teacher residency program. So in August, I will be moving to Syracuse to start my residency there. I'm really excited about that.
So you go from snowy Montana to snowy upstate New York.
Oh yeah, and then I was also told that, you know, it may potentially be colder than Montana. I'm like, I don't know why I signed myself up for this stuff. But
it's that East Coast cold, that East Coast, the humidity. It just like it sinks to your core. We don't have that west of the Mississippi.
Nope, no, we don't. So that is the next big thing, but that also comes with a master's degree in teaching. So I'll acquire my second master's degree. And all the program is supposed to be a year long, so it's another accelerated program essentially. So all in all, I would have spent 4 years in college and obtained 1 bachelor's degree and 2 master's degree. Because I was only in school for my bachelor's for 2 full years because I acquired credits from the military, so I never actually physically did a freshman, sophomore year for college.
Right, right. That's incredible.
I am working on it will be a series, but right now I'm just working on the first one, and it it features a mixed cultured girl as the main character. She's closer to a young woman than a girl actually, but I thought it would be interesting because as a reader, and I read a lot, I've never come across a character that was like me. Yes, I've come across Black characters, but they've always been the stereotypical loudmouth Black friend in the background. It's never really well, and I'm not saying that there aren't any about Black girls, but never in the genre that I like to read. So I'm creating a character that is Jamaican and other. I don't want to put it all out there yet, but she ends up on a journey that does eventually bring her to Jamaica, but it will bring her to different countries as well. She is following the travel journals left behind by her grandmother in her search for her missing grandmother. And it brings her up close and personal with different supernatural beings that she'd never thought existed. But the interesting part about that supernatural aspect is that the different characters are pulled from different cultures. So it's not all fae and it's not all vampires and all the same thing. It's everything included, but each book in the series will focus on a specific one and how it gets them to that next book or the next country or area, the culture they will experience for that next book. So I'm really excited about that. The thing that scares me about it is that the idea is so great that I will mess up the actual writing of the story. And it has delayed my writing a bit just with that little thing in the back of my head saying, you know, you're going to ruin a great idea. So I'm trying to take my time and pull together all the information I'll need to make sure when I do get it out on paper, and I send it to see if I can get it published or just have somebody proofread it. They don't just immediately throw it out and say it's trash. So that's
exciting.
The next major writing goal. I'm still doing little poem pieces in between, but my true love is for paranormal fiction.
That's awesome. And I think as writers, especially as authors, we've all been there where our ideas are huge and we need to, funnel them in. Um, there are tons of tools out there to help you do that. If you ever, you went to I went to Full Sail too. So I'm sure you know what they all are, but if you ever need any ideas or somebody bounce that, you know where I am. I'm always here. So bounce away if you need some help or whatever. I have one of those middle grade ideas that it's been floating around in my head for years, and it's one of those big, like I'm create this huge world and it's going to go from here to there and pull things from history in it, and I have that same problem where it's like, this is so big, where do I start and how do I get from book 1 to book 2? And so in the meantime, I've barely mapped it out. So I get where you are. I understand that. But wow, you're not stopping. I mean, you're going back to school, you're going back to teach, you're moving across the country again. There's no slowing you down.
No, I figured every time I've finished a degree, I'm like, okay, I'm done. And then another opportunity
Except I'm
pops up.
not.
I'm like, well, I'll just try it and see how it goes. And if I get in, I'll go with it. I'll go with it. And Full Sail was an opportunity that presented itself. How I actually found out about Full Sail was that my younger brother, who was living with me at the time, wanted to get a degree for gaming, I think design or something. And he came up on this school at a college where he's like, well, I'm not big on college, but, maybe I want to check out this one school. And we were living in Florida at the time. So he is the first time he ever expressed any interest at all in college. I'm like, if he asked, he probably genuinely wants to do it. So let's go. And we went there. And while I'm just sitting there bored on my phone, it scrolled across that they have a creative writing degree all online. I'm like, that's what I want. That's the thing. So after I was done, I had about a week after I was done at Arizona State, where I just felt like I was floating into nothing. I'm like, I can't handle this. I'm gonna send in the application, and if they accept me, then I'll do that. And then of course I got accepted, and halfway through, I tried doing the Teach for America program, and I made it all the way through the interviews, and they're like, we're sorry, we don't want you. I'm like, but what do I do now? Because I was trying to get stuff lined up so as soon as I'm done with Full Sail, I can move on to the next thing. That did not work out, but what they did do is they send your information to similar programs, and I didn't realize fully that they did that at the time. So I got a few other programs similar to Teach for America, and then I'm like, I don't want to do those ones. Then I got the email from NYU, and I'd started to apply, but when it came up, it wanted me to start that fall. I'm like, well, I'm already halfway through something. That's just gonna have to wait. So I responded with an email saying, if you send it to me next year, I'll consider it. So in January, no, it was closer toward the end of September. It's like, well, we're, doing the early applications for next fall. Would you like to apply? I'm like, you know what? What the hey, let's do it. So I filled out the application. I went through a whole other interview process, and then they're like, oh yeah, congratulations, you're accepted. I'm like, oh, I'm going back to school. And then it's more like, oh no, I'm going back to school. So it's always the idea, I think I'm done, and then I do more. So at this point, it might as well just conform myself to the idea that I will also be going for my doctorate after this is done. I've already come this far. So I'm gonna take a little break in between after I'm done with my master's, so I can focus more on teaching for a bit. And then maybe after a year or two, I will go back for my doctorate, because my end goal is to be able to teach creative writing on a college or university level. And I want to be able to have all the resources behind me to be able to do that. And that just doesn't go together. But I also want to be a writer, and it's not just to get a couple published here or there. I want it to be on my resume as something else that I do. So I want to teach and I want to write. And when I started out on this path, everyone always said, well, why do you want to be a writer? Like you can't sell it like art. It's not guaranteed. So I'm like, well, that is the reason why I will teach as well, because teaching English and creative writing still gives me all the skills I need to be a writer. They kind of work hand in hand. One is a guaranteed career that will make sure I get paid and I can put food on the table. And the other one is that dream job that most people usually let float off in the background. But I refuse to let go of the dream. So I'm dragging them both with me, and I will go on and teach and I'll write in my free time. And maybe one day I'll get to the point where writing can be the job I do and teaching can be the thing I do in my spare time if I want to. And if I get there, fantastic. That would be the happiest moment of my life. If I don't, it doesn't mean I'm not happy. It means I'm getting the best of both worlds, however way I can get it.
That's awesome. Go back to your grandmother and her grandchildren. You were the
I was a first. So my grandmother had 6 kids, my mom being the oldest of the 6. And between the 6 of them, I think there are 14 grandkids. I am the second of the 14, but my oldest sister skipped the whole college experience. I have one aunt who had a degree. So out of my generation, out of the grandkids, I'm the first to get a bachelor's. But out of 3 generations, if you go all the way back to my grandmother, I am the first to have 1 master's degree, and in a year will be the first to have 2. I don't know if my cousins, I have 2 cousins that are currently in college and they should be graduating soon. So they will also have their first degree, but within 3 generations and possibly 4, I'm probably the first to have that many and to have so much going on at the same time. I'm also the first to be in the military. But after me, my little sister went in as Army Reserve, and then my younger brother, the one that I raised, I brought him into the recruiting office before I left Florida, and now he's in the Navy.
So was that the one that was going to Full Sail? Did he not go?
He wanted to go to the military first because he wasn't sure about how he would pay for college. So he said he would do the military first and then use his GI Bill to go to college afterwards.
That's incredible. Celebrate those accomplishments and remember those generations before you often. When you are floating down your river and stuck in a stream that took you off your path, celebrate everything you have accomplished and the women in your family who walked before you. Not just the women, but obviously, we opened
it's
this
mostly
with
women. It's
your,
fine.
your grandmother, and so celebrate that. You've accomplished so much, and you have not forgotten, because you said it earlier, my kids are watching. So it's what an amazing story. What an amazing woman you are. I'm so honored to be in your presence right now. It's incredible. Thank you for being a part of this. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Before we sign off, is there anything else you want to share about you or your work? I know you have a website. I forget what it's called.
The Right Kind of Magic.
I was going to say something about magic.
With
I was like,
right, WRITE.
Right. So The Right Kind of Magic. Is that where we can find your other work? Or
I have a couple short fiction pieces on there and a couple poems, because most of the other stuff I've written, I've sent them into competitions and stuff, and I can't post them on there while they're pending, essentially. I have a couple pictures on there because I had an amateur photo time. But I have started a blog. I only have one blog post on there at this moment. I eased back a little bit because I wanted to make sure I get some better piece to put on there to get more work out there. But now I can also add to my credentials that I'm a published writer. So
Yay!
yay.
Yay you! That's awesome. So the Right Kind of
Yeah.
Magic on Instagram, on Facebook, Right spelled WRITE.
Yes.
Follow. I'm all for uplifting writers and getting people to follow. It's such a lonely world when we get stuck in these writing caves and nobody brings us coffee or wine and we have to beg for readers.
No. My writing
So
caves is in a Starbucks, so I just sit there with my coffee and sip. They don't have to bring it to me. I'll go get it and go back and sit.
yeah, I
Put
haven't
my
done that.
AirPods in.
I haven't done that in over a year, and I miss that.
Well, there isn't a
Still out of the
Starbucks in
world
Miles
over
City,
Oh,
so I can't do that here either. The
no.
closest one is 2 hours away, and so is the closest shopping mall and airport. It's really sad.
Yeah, I grew up in a town like that, very, very tiny. I understand. My favorite place to write is outside next to my pool, but I don't do it that often. I don't know why. I'm always stuck in my office. But my office is where I'm most productive, I think. I'm outside by the pool, I'm looking around like, oh, look, there's a bird.
Mhm. You have a lot of squirrel moments. It's like, squirrel,
I
okay, I
do.
can write. And you get 2 sentences in, and then the water rippling in the pool just looks so nice, and you
Yeah,
stare off at it for 15 minutes.
yeah. I was just so relaxed. Yeah. Thank you very much for spending this time with me. I am so excited for this annual to drop. This is the second year I've done this. The first year I did this on my own, or last year I did it with a partner. So this is the first year I've done this on my own. Um, and I don't think I'll go back to having a partner because I had so much say in the pieces and the development of the pieces. This is just it's exciting. It's really exciting, and I'm incredibly honored to have you in it. So thank
And
you
thank you
for
for having me.
yeah, of course. Thank you for talking with us. We will chat soon. Take care.
Alrighty.